When I knocked on room 412 at the Brown Palace, I already knew my husband was lying. I just did not know how far the lie reached. He opened the door in a hotel robe. Valerie stood behind him with champagne, and in that second, my whole marriage changed shape. I did not scream. I handed him an ice bucket, smiled, and walked away. That was the night I stopped being a wife and started being an audit. I built my life on order. My pantry had labels. My calendar had color codes. Bills were paid early, and numbers made sense to me in a way people often did not. That Thursday night started like any other in our Cherry Creek house. I was in the kitchen with onions on the board and chicken on low heat, waiting for Benjamin to text that he was leaving work. He had said he was stuck at an emergency zoning board meeting for a multi-million-dollar high-rise project. He sounded annoyed, rushed, believable. I had spent 11 years believing him. At 7:12, I checked Find My iPhone so I could time dinner. The little blue dot should have been near City Hall. Instead, it sat still downtown at the Brown Palace. I refreshed the screen 3 times. Same spot, same bright blue dot. The Brown Palace was not a meeting site. It was a luxury hotel. People went there for private drinks and things they did not want seen in daylight. Something cold tightened under my ribs. I turned off the burner, left the chopped onions on the counter, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I did not know what I was going to find. I only knew dinner could wait. The truth could not. The parking garage smelled like wet cement and old oil. I sat in my Audi with the engine off and stared at the elevator doors until my eyes burned. My hands were too steady. That scared me. I called Benjamin and put him on speaker. He answered on the 3rd ring. "How's work?" I asked. He paused just long enough to sound stressed instead of caught. Then he said, "Busy, babe. Up to my neck in blueprints with the planning committee. Might be a late one." I looked up at the low garage ceiling and felt my jaw lock. He even added a tired little sigh, as if he wanted credit for working late. I said, "Okay, be safe," and hung up before the disgust reached my voice. Then I went inside. The front desk clerk looked polished and cautious, the kind of person trained not to help strangers. Years earlier, during a fraud review, I had learned that confidence opened more doors than anger ever did. So I leaned in, lowered my voice, and said I needed to get urgent tax papers to my husband before he joined a call with investors. I gave Benjamin's full name, his firm, and the tone of an annoyed wife fixing a man's mistake. The clerk hesitated. Then she gave me what I needed. Room 412. The 4th floor hallway was quiet enough for me to hear a housekeeping cart around the corner. My heels sank into the carpet as I walked toward room 412. Shock made everything bright. Brass door numbers, lemon polish in the air, the soft hum of hidden vents. I knocked once. Benjamin opened the door almost right away. He wore a white bathrobe and looked like he had thrown it on in a panic. The color drained from his face so fast it almost seemed unreal. Behind him stood Valerie. Valerie, the urban planning commissioner, was near the window pouring champagne into 2 glasses like she belonged there. 3 weeks earlier, she had sat at our table, smiled at me, and asked where I bought my earrings. For 1 second, my body forgot how to stand. Then something hard and cold held me upright. I reached behind me and lifted the empty ice bucket I had pulled from the housekeeping cart. I smiled, thin and sharp, and said, "They forgot your ice bucket in the hall." Then I put it in his hands. Benjamin stared at me. Valerie froze, with the bottle still tilted. I did not give either of them a scene. I turned around and walked back down the hall with my spine straight, even though every step felt like I was walking on broken glass. That was the viral subversion. They expected pain. I gave them procedure. I drove to a King Soopers parking lot because I needed somewhere bright and normal. People pushed carts. A kid dropped bread. A woman loaded tulips into her trunk. The world kept moving, and I needed that. I parked near the cart return, locked the doors, and set a timer for 4 minutes. Then I cried. The first sob ripped out of me so hard I folded over the steering wheel. My face burned. My chest hurt. I cried for the husband I thought I had, for the woman who had smiled in my home, and for the life I had trusted. I let it all come, but I kept one eye on the timer the whole time. 3 minutes. 2. 1. When the alarm went off, I stopped. Not because I was healed, because I was done giving grief the driver's seat. I wiped my face with a napkin from the glove box, fixed my mascara in the mirror, and sat there until my breathing evened out. That was when the grieving wife got out of the car. The forensic accountant got in. I did not need a screaming match. I needed records, dates, transfers, proof. If Benjamin had lied with that much ease, then whatever sat under the lie was likely worse. By the time I started the Audi again, I was no longer asking who he loved. I was asking what he had touched. Benjamin got home after 10, smelling like hotel soap and expensive cologne. He kissed my cheek in the kitchen and asked if I had eaten. Then he loosened his tie and complained about the city wasting his whole evening in a useless meeting. I looked right at him and said I was sorry. That was the first lie I told. I played the perfect wife that night. I offered tea. I laughed once in the right place. I even set his phone on the charger when he yawned and said he was exhausted. When he fell asleep, I waited until his breathing turned deep and even. Then I slipped out of bed and went to the office off the den. I logged into our secure home server. I was not looking for love letters. I was looking for ledgers. Benjamin hid emotional mess better than financial mess. Men like him often did. They watched their text messages and forgot their expense trails. I opened project folders, reimbursement files, private budgets, vendor sheets, and archived approvals. Around 1 a.m, I found transfers that did not fit. Amounts had moved from joint accounts into a business entity I did not recognize, quietly, repeatedly. I wrote the name on a yellow pad. Summit Consulting. The room felt different after that, like the walls had shifted while I was not looking. I kept digging. Summit Consulting was not a real business. It had no real staff, no visible work, and no footprint that made sense. It was a shell, clean on the outside, hollow underneath. What mattered was the money trail. Benjamin had been pulling funds from our joint home equity line of credit, our HELOC, in amounts small enough to avoid panic but large enough to matter. He moved the money through Summit Consulting and labeled it as consulting fees, strategy retainers, and permit support. More than one payment led straight to Valerie. I sat in the glow of the monitor and felt heat break across my back. He was not just cheating. He was using our house, our credit, and my name to bribe the urban planning commissioner so his real estate developments would keep moving. The hotel had been betrayal. This was exposure. I printed everything: HELOC draws, shell transfers, fake fee descriptions, approval links, dates. Each page came out warm and crisp. I stacked them in order because order was the only thing stopping me from shaking. An affair could be denied, softened, or blamed on weakness. Bribery had timestamps. By 3:08 a.m., my neck ached and my eyes burned, but something inside me had gone very still. I no longer needed answers from Benjamin. I had records. The next morning, I packed the papers into a banker's box and drove to Boulder. Josephine's office sat above a private wealth firm on a quiet street where everything looked controlled. Even the sign on her door was small, like it did not need to shout. She was a high-net-worth divorce attorney with a reputation sharp enough to arrive before she did. People said Josephine preferred documents to drama because documents lasted longer. I believed it the second I met her. She listened without interrupting while I laid out the hotel, Valerie, Summit Consulting, the HELOC, and the paper trail. When I slid the ledgers across her desk, she read in silence for less than 2 minutes. Then she smiled. It was not warm, it was precise. "You do not have a marriage problem," she said. "You have exposure." For the first time since the Brown Palace, my pulse slowed. She tapped the files. If he used marital assets to fund bribery and hide an affair, we do not just plan a divorce, we plan a corporate dismantling. We spent the next hour building a framework, protect my assets, preserve evidence, separate liability, control timing, and never warn him early. When I left Boulder, the pain was still there, but now it had structure. That changed everything. The worst part was not finding the truth. It was living beside it long enough to use it. For 6 months, I gave the performance of a loyal wife so cleanly that no one questioned it. I made Benjamin's coffee the way he liked it. I reminded him about his mother's birthday. I sat beside him at work dinners while Valerie smiled across the table like we were all decent people. Every time her hand brushed his sleeve, my skin wanted to crawl. I never let it show. Instead, I used what I knew. If Benjamin hinted that Valerie was free on Thursday, I nudged him toward a late networking drink. If he mentioned permits, I suggested the hotel bar was quieter than his office. He thought he was hiding. Really, I was managing his schedule. Every extra hour he spent with her gave me time. I met Josephine. I copied files. I built timelines. I moved backups off shared devices. I documented every transfer, every fake invoice, every lie. At night, he slept beside me like a man with nothing to fear. Sometimes his foot brushed mine under the blanket, and my body still recognized him before my mind did. That was the cruel part. But each morning, I woke up sharper. People who felt safe got sloppy. So I made him feel safe. Once Josephine mapped the legal side, I built the financial exit. I owned a consulting firm that handled forensic reviews, so I treated my own life like a troubled client file. First, I restructured the business. Then I routed my primary income into a new trust in another state, one designed to be dull, legal, and hard to touch. After that, I moved my inherited mutual funds out of any place where Benjamin could even try to make a claim. Every move was documented and timed to look routine. The joint accounts I left alone. That part mattered. I did not want alarms. I wanted calm. So I stopped depositing my own paychecks there. One night, he noticed a smaller balance and asked why payroll seemed strange. I kept buttering toast and told him it was a temporary payroll glitch at work. He barely looked up from his phone. He just nodded and asked if I could cover a little more of the house note that month. I said yes. That was who he had become. Not alert, not careful, entitled. He assumed my money would keep arriving because it always had. He assumed my silence meant safety because it always had. By then, my old life was already becoming the ghost entity. It still had my name on it, but I was removing the parts that made it mine. He lived inside the shell and never noticed. Anger was loud, relief was quieter, and much more useful. If Benjamin believed I trusted him, he stopped watching his mirrors. So I booked a lavish, non-refundable anniversary trip to Tuscany for the following year. I did it at the kitchen island while he answered emails beside me. I showed him vineyards, stone villas, and long candlelit dinners under the sky. He looked surprised, then deeply relieved. "You really want to do this?" he asked. I smiled and said we both needed something beautiful on the calendar. That trip became the distraction play. After that, his whole body changed around me. He stopped hiding his phone as carefully. He quit checking the mail. He ignored bank statements in the entry basket and never once asked why some digital notices had changed. He was so thankful I suspected nothing that he became careless. Meanwhile, I erased my digital footprint from places it did not need to remain. I changed recovery settings, removed old logins, moved backups, and built a clean map of what was mine and what had been exposed. Josephine called it evidence discipline. I called it fresh air. Every time Benjamin kissed my forehead and thanked me for planning Tuscany, I felt the same hard knot rise in my throat. He thought he was being rewarded. He was being made comfortable for impact. The Aspen vacation cabin was Benjamin's favorite asset because it made him feel important. He loved the wood beams, the mountain view, the private trail. He loved saying we owned it, even though more of my money had gone into it than his. By football season, Josephine had the timing ready. One Sunday, Benjamin was on the couch watching a Broncos game with nachos on his lap and his full attention on the screen. I walked in with a stack of tax abatement documents, for one of his business filings and said I needed quick signatures before Monday. He groaned and asked if it could wait. I said no. He signed page 1, then 2, then 3, barely reading any of them. The crowd roared from the television. Buried in the middle was the quitclaim deed that transferred his rights to the Aspen vacation cabin to a holding company I controlled. He signed it without reading. I stood there with the papers in my hand and felt my heart beat in my fingertips. There was no thrill in it, only calm. He had lied to my face for months because he thought I was predictable. Now he was giving away an asset for the same reason. Arrogance. When the Broncos scored, he threw up both hands and cheered like he had won something. I took the signed quitclaim deed to my office, closed the door, and locked it. By winter, the Denver Commercial Real Estate Gala was all anyone in Benjamin's world talked about. He was set to receive the Developer of the Year award, and Valerie would present it to him in front of investors, city officials, and the people he cared most about impressing. The timing was too perfect to waste. I copied the Summit Consulting ledgers, the HELOC draws, the fake consulting fees, and the approvals that tied Valerie to his projects. I loaded everything onto a flash drive and mailed it to an investigative reporter at the Denver Post whose work I knew from other corruption stories. I kept the note short. No drama, just enough to point the flashlight at the right place. Then I waited. Every day, Benjamin moved through the house glowing with self-importance. He practiced humble lines for his speech in the mirror. He asked which tie looked more trustworthy. Valerie sent warm little texts that lit up his phone while he stood beside me. I said nothing. 3 days before the gala, the reporter requested one more confirming file through the anonymous drop I had set up. That was when I knew the story was alive. I sent the last document before sunrise and stood in the kitchen with my coffee growing cold in my hand. By then, the structure was already cracking. They just had not heard it yet. I wore black to the gala because black did not ask for attention. It took it. My dress fit cleanly, my hair sat smooth, and my face looked calm enough to be mistaken for grace. Benjamin told me I looked stunning. I thanked him politely. The ballroom glowed under chandeliers. Waiters moved through the room with champagne and sparkling water. At the front, the stage lights warmed the podium where my husband would soon speak about integrity and building the future, like those words still belonged in his mouth. I sat at the front table and folded my hands. Valerie looked radiant in silver. Before the program began, she leaned toward Benjamin and touched his sleeve too long, too softly. He smiled at her with a private look I had once thought was mine. Then his name was called. He walked to the stage under applause and accepted the glass award for Developer of the Year, like the city had crowned him for character instead of timing. He thanked mentors, he thanked partners, he thanked me. I clapped the loudest. I already knew what was coming. The speech was the peak. The fall had already been scheduled. Benjamin stepped off the stage, still smiling, his award in one hand. Valerie stood near the podium with that pleased look she wore in public. Music started in the corner. Glasses lifted. The room began to breathe again. Then the phone started buzzing. One table, then another, then almost all of them. The sound moved across the banquet hall like a wave. Heads dropped. Screens lit up, faces blue and white. A man near me read something, blinked, then looked at Benjamin like he had never seen him before. I did not need to check my own phone. I already knew. The Denver Post article had gone live. The headline exposed the bribery ring, named Benjamin and Valerie, and laid out Summit Consulting, the HELOC trail, and the payoffs in plain language. The room went silent in pieces until even the band stopped playing. Benjamin looked at his screen, then at Valerie, then at me. Panic changed his face fast. Valerie went pale. I lifted my glass, met his eyes, and whispered, "Enjoy the blueprints." Then I stood up and walked out the front doors while the room behind me broke into stunned noise. That was the notification. Their secret had finally met an audience. I had timed everything to the hour. While Benjamin stood in the ballroom trying to survive public shame, movers finished the last sweep through the Cherry Creek house. By the time I left the gala, my clothes were gone, my files were gone, my framed photos were packed, and the dog was already waiting in my car with a blanket. When Benjamin rushed home to do damage control, he found the empty house. I was not there to watch it, but Josephine later told me enough. He had pushed through the front door, shouting my name, and stopped dead in the kitchen. The living room was stripped to walls and window light. No couch, no art, no warm little signs of a life shared in good faith. On the kitchen island sat the hotel ice bucket from 6 months earlier. Inside it was one clean set of divorce papers. No letter, no speech, just legal documents where the champagne should have been. That mattered to me. I did not want him confused. He had not lost me in a burst of anger. He had been removed through process. He built the lie with comfort, habit, and arrogance. I answered with paper. And paper, when it was properly prepared, felt colder than rage. $1.15 balance. The next morning, Benjamin began calling before sunrise. I did not answer. He texted, called again, then reached for Josephine. Fear had finally made him practical. He needed money. The article had triggered calls from lenders, partners, and city offices. He knew a criminal defense attorney would cost more than panic could solve. So he logged into our joint savings account to wire a retainer and found the balance waiting for him. The number was exactly $1.15. Not zero, not some flashy insult. $1.15. Josephine later told me he refreshed the page 3 times because men like Benjamin always believed bad news must be a glitch before they accepted it was math. But it was math. Months of tracing, separating, and documenting had done what I designed them to do. I had removed what was mine, protected what he had no right to risk, and corrected for what he had pulled through the HELOC into Summit Consulting. He sent me a furious email calling me cruel and unstable. I read it while the dog slept beside my chair. What I noticed most was what he did not say. He did not call himself innocent, and now every number in his life was starting to turn against him. Valerie lasted less than a day. The same woman who had poured champagne in room 412 and smiled across a gala podium began saving herself the moment her pension and freedom came into view. Her office was under review, her messages were being requested, federal prison was no longer a rumor for other people. So she flipped. I heard it first through the reporter, then through Josephine. Valerie had called Benjamin the morning after the article dropped. She cried, said they needed to get their story straight, and begged him to meet her right away. He went. He still thought they were a team. What he did not know was that she had already made her move. She wore a wire to the meeting and let him talk. He filled the silence with fear, and the fear filled the recording with permit talk, fake fees, deleted messages, and blame. Before lunch, she handed the audio to the district attorney. Rats on a Sinking Ship was not just a title to me. It was the plainest truth in the story. Selfish people loved loyalty right up until loyalty cost them something. When Josephine told me, I stood by the window and watched snow drift past the glass. I felt no pity for Valerie, and none for the man who believed she would go down beside him. Once quick cash disappeared, Benjamin turned to property. That was his religion. If a thing had square footage and a view, he trusted it more than truth. So he called a real estate broker about the Aspen vacation cabin. I was on a video call with Josephine when her assistant slipped her a note. She read it, looked up at me, and said, "He just found out." The broker had pulled the file and told Benjamin that he did not own the cabin anymore. His rights had been transferred months earlier through a holding company, fully recorded and valid. For a few seconds he argued. Then he demanded copies. That was when the football game came back to him. The stack of tax abatement forms, the Broncos game on full volume, the pen in his hand. His own signature on the quitclaim deed he never bothered to read. The Aspen discovery was not dramatic from the outside. No one screamed, no glass broke. But I could picture the exact second recognition hit him, that sick drop in the stomach when a person realized the trap had been sprung by his own carelessness. I let out one long breath. By then, there was nothing left for him to sell except excuses. By the time we met for the deposition, Benjamin looked 10 years older. The conference room was cold, beige, and plain. A pitcher of water sat between us untouched. His lawyer looked tired. Josephine looked ready. Benjamin could not stay still. His knee bounced. His tie sat crooked. The old shine was gone. At first, he tried wounded, then confused, then angry. Finally, he leaned forward and asked the question that had clearly been burning inside him. "Why didn't you just confront me at the hotel that night?" I looked at my nails for a second before I answered. I wanted the pause. I wanted him to feel how little urgency I had left for his feelings. "I didn't want an apology, Benjamin. I wanted my equity." The room went quiet. His mouth opened, then closed. He stared at me as if that answer was somehow crueler than what he had done. Maybe to him it was. An apology would have kept him at the center of the story. Equity moved the focus back to damage, risk, and value. He had cheated on me. He had lied to me. He had exposed me financially. I answered in the language he respected most: cost. I moved into a penthouse condo in downtown Denver, with tall windows, quiet floors, and a balcony that caught the evening light. The first night there, I slept all the way through. No second phone lighting up in the dark. No listening for the careful steps of a liar coming home. A few weeks later, I stood on the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders and watched the evening news through the open glass doors. The anchor was covering Benjamin's indictment, the collapse of his firm, and the widening review of permits tied to Valerie's office. His face flashed on the screen for 3 seconds, strained and smaller than I remembered. I did not feel joy. What I felt was colder and cleaner than joy. It was the satisfaction of a balanced ledger. The city lights below me looked like numbers spread across black paper. For years I had believed trust came first and proof came later. Now I knew trust without proof was just permission for the wrong person to get comfortable. I turned off the television, opened my laptop, and got back to work. The point was removal. Clean cut, precise, final. Once the rot was gone, the rest of life could heal around the space it left. And mine did. If I had to name the real payoff, it was not only the gala, it was the chain after it, the empty house, the $1.15 balance, rats on a sinking ship, the Aspen discovery, the deposition, one consequence after another, each one built from records Benjamin had signed, sent, approved, or hidden. That was why the justice felt earned. I had not ruined an innocent man. I had exposed a guilty one. And the moment that stayed with me most was his face when he realized I never wanted flowers, excuses, or late honesty. I wanted the damage measured correctly. I wanted my name cut away from his corruption. I wanted every lie priced. By then, his panic had nowhere left to go. The bill had simply arrived. I learned that karma did not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrived as records, signatures, timelines, and silence. People like Benjamin counted on emotion because emotion was messy. But truth, once it was documented, stayed sharp. And once I saw that, I stopped craving dramatic revenge. I wanted justice that held. If this story stayed with you, tell me what part hit hardest. Was it the blue dot, the ice bucket, the gala, or the $1.15 balance? And if you have ever seen a lie catch up to someone in the most satisfying way, share it below. Like, subscribe, and come back for the next story.